Hey there! Let's now build the sidebar and the navigation of our app. And so we will once more build a really cool hover effect that I already showed you before. And for that, I'm going to show you how to use transform with scale Y and how to transition multiple properties with different settings. Plus, you're going to learn how and why to use the current color variable and how to use even more advanced Flexbox alignment techniques. So let's get to work. So the sidebar that I'm talking about is of course this one here. So up here we have our navigation with this nice hover effect that I was talking about. And then down here we just have some copyright text, okay? So that is what we're going to do in this lecture. And as always, let's start with the HTML markup. So we have our nav here. Let's give it some space here. And then let's start. So the navigation as usual is an unordered list. Okay. And I'm calling it side nav. So for the side navigation, of course. Then in here, each of the navigation elements is of course an list item, and it has the name side nav, which is the block, and then the element name is simply item. Okay, and then in here, of course, the anchor element. So side nav link with the href going to nowhere. And then in here, we finally have our icon and our text. So we do this exactly the same way we did before. So SVG with the class side nav icon. And then in here, we use the use element. So xlink href. And then we want our sprite SVG. And now let's take a look at which icon we actually want. So the first one is this house. Then we have the flight, then the key, and then here this map. So first up is the one called icon home. And so remember, all we have to do is to now set the hash icon here, and that's it. Close it, and here we go. So again, this is the best way of using SVGs in HTML by only including one SVG file, which is the sprite here. So we include this here and up here. But this is all the same file, so we only have one HTTP request. So that's the whole goal of having a sprite image, okay? So this one is the icon home. And so let's just add a span element here very quickly, just to put the text here, okay? So this one is for a hotel. And so this is how one list item here looks like in the navigation. So let's grab a copy of this and make 4 of them. All right, so the next one is for the flight, then car rental and tours. And so let's now get the icons. So icon, aircraft takeoff. No, that's a long one. Then the car rental was the key, so it's just key. And the last one is probably just called map. So yeah. Here we go, and map. So that is the markup for the navigation. And now let's just put the legal text right under this one, okay? So it's just a div, and I'm calling it legal, and then just some text here. So copy, and this is an HTML entity, which I showed you before, 2017 by Trillo. All right, reserved, okay? But once again, I want to mention here that you can feel completely free to use this project like in your portfolio or to show off for potential clients or something like that. What you can't do though is to claim that you designed it by yourself, okay? But it's fine if you use it for your own projects, or you can change some stuff and then do your own app maybe using this interface. So all of that is no problem, okay? But with that being said, let's now check out our webpage. And whoa, so here we go. These icons are huge, as you can see. And what you can also see is that now here the other side of the content, so the hotel view, stretched all the way here until the bottom of this container. And remember, that's because we're using Flexbox here to put this one here on side of the hotel view. Okay? And since the default of align items is stretch, well, they will both stretch all the way they can. And so automatically, when you increase the height of one of the columns here, the height of the other column increases as well. And so that's great. Without having to write any extra code, this functionality here works just fine. And usually that's exactly what we want. Okay, so moving on to our CSS now, let's write all the selectors such as we've been doing. So first we write the selectors and then we start filling it with some code. So side navigation. So what do we have here? We have the nav item, the link. Let me see what else. So item, link, and icon. Okay, and then down here we have the legal text. And since it's a completely new block or new component, let's add a new comment. Just like this. And since we're here, let's actually already style this text. So font size 1.2 rem. The text should be aligned to the center. I want some padding of 2.5 rem here. And finally, I also want some color. So let's add it here, close to the text properties. And the color that I want is some nice light gray. And it's this one here, so the darkest of them, so that it makes a nice contrast with the really dark background. Okay, so that is the legal text. Let's now just very quickly decrease the size of these huge icons in the navigation so that it doesn't look that crazy anymore. So we say width, and let's use 175 rem. And of course the same for the height. So usually we size these icons here in SVG as squares, okay? So let's take a look now. And yeah, so that's much better. Of course, there's a lot of formatting to do here still, but we can do that in a bit. Well, actually there's an icon here missing. Let's check that one out. So icon, okay. So the icon here is twice. So now it should be here. Yeah, there we are. Okay, now before we actually format this navigation part here, let's actually finish the formatting of this entire sidebar here, okay? Because there's still something left to do. And for that, let's first increase the height here of this hotel view to pretend that there's already a lot of content here, okay? So that it is approximately like this height here. And later we, of course, will then remove that height, okay? So component, and actually it's in the layouts here, right? So it's in the hotel view. And we can say height, let's say like something really huge, like 80 rem, okay? So these two here are just for testing purposes. We're gonna remove them later. Test. And all right, so now it's huge, just so that as it looks as if there was already a lot of content. Now, if you noticed here on the original, this text, this legal text, is pushed all the way here to the bottom, okay? And I did that because it's a great opportunity to show you yet another technique in Flexbox, okay? So let me show you that. So let's think together here. Imagine that this overall sidebar here would be a Flex container and that this legal text and this navigation here were the Flex items. How would you then create a lot of space here in between these two so that the legal text is pushed all the way to the bottom? What do you think is the best way of achieving this? Well, the justify content property set to space between sounds actually perfect for that, right? Now this works along the main axis. And so the main axis is usually from the left to the right, so like this, not from top to bottom. But there is actually a solution for that, and that is to use Flex Direction. And so right now, we are finally going to use Flex Direction with a really good use case for it, okay? So let's do that. And so all we have to do is to come here to the sidebar, set it to display Flex, to say that it's a Flex container, and then say Flex Direction, and set it to column. And now we just change the direction of the main axis from left to right to top to bottom. Okay? Now without declaring anything else here, this will not change much, as you can see here, right? So it still looks the same. But now we are ready to use the justify content property. So justify content, and we want it set to space between. And the result is, of course, that. So now this legal text is pushed all the way to the bottom while this here stays at the top. And that's because Flexbox divides all the available white space between the elements. And in this case, there are only two elements, and so therefore one is pushed to one side and the other one is pushed to the other side. Of course, we could also change it to other things. So let's do that here in the DevTools. So we could have space around as always, and then it would look like this. So it would have half the space here on one side, the other half here on the other side, and then the same thing for the navigation. But that's not what we want here, right? We just want each one in a different corner. So space between. So all we have to do is reload, and here we go. So I hope that made a lot of sense to you, okay? So we had to change the flex direction from row to column so that we could use the justify content in a different direction than the one that we were used to doing it. Okay, so up here, for example, we use justify content from the left to the right, and here we use it from the top to the bottom because we rotated the flex direction. Okay, and so that is a technique you should always keep in mind because it's one that can be really useful for your own projects as well. All right, so now all we have to do is to style this navigation here because this looks like quite unfinished yet, right? And we're going to leave that to the next lecture after a quick break.